Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred. And as promised, I wanted to make a little follow-up video to the one that I made last week, which was about this 30-day experiment with the carnivore diet to try to heal some autoimmune issues, low blood sugar, panic attacks, ulcerative colitis, all of these different things. So if you want to check that out, it's just chronologically right before this one, a week ago. But what I said in that video was that I wanted to talk a little bit more about this journey of listening to my body, which is ongoing, and the parts of me that I observe that get in the way. So I've come to the point where I know my body's signals. I hear, the pain speaking to me, the discomfort, different symptoms. I see them as good as teachers, as telling me what they need. I can feel my body's attraction response and aversion response, but there are still parts that will override it. So I see it, but there are parts that will say, heck no, we are not going to listen to our body, to abide by what it's saying. That's death. We cannot do that, right? So part of the journey of listening to our bodies is really befriending and getting to know the parts who feel like it's not safe for us to listen to our bodies in whatever way, right? So, for example, I had a back injury about a year ago. It was really debilitating for a good 3 months, and it pretty much healed. But recently, I lifted something that was much too heavy for me and kind of re-injured it. And so listening to my body says, you better as heck not try to lift anything heavy. But what that requires of me is to ask for a lot of help from my husband. So I have to say, hey, can you lift my suitcase off the bed or onto the bed? Can you take this laundry to the laundry room? Can you lift this bag of trash for me or take it downstairs? Or can you, just anything, groceries, anything that's remotely heavy, can you lift this for me? So it's a daily, ongoing, frequently throughout the day, asking for help. And I have parts that absolutely dread asking for help, not because my current husband's response is bad about that. He's absolutely wonderful and happy to help and never gives me a hard time about it. So it really is based in past trauma of, I think when I was a child, well, there's a thinking part, but I know that as a child, um, I'm aware actually what my parts are doing. But anyway, as a child, I needed, especially when I was young and my mom was very depressed, I needed to stay low and not be needy and not, you know, cause any disturbance to my mother. So I learned to be very self-sufficient. And then with my first marriage, which was quite abusive, if and when I ever even remotely needed a little bit of help, it was met with rage, with shaming, put downs, threats, all kinds of things. So I learned that to ask for help was threatening, right? To my well-being, to my life, right? And so still now it's very, very difficult. And so I can listen to those parts and I can speak for them to my husband and say, hey, this is not about you. I know that you won't react badly, but this is what's happening inside of me. It really is kind of an autopilot response of those parts. Shut down asking for help. Don't you dare ask for help. So I'll find myself overriding my body and just trying to lift something so that I don't have to ask. And then I re-injure myself and I have to, um, you know, spend days in recovery. And recently my husband said something that was really helpful to me. He said, it really helps me. It makes me feel less stressed when I know that you're listening to your body. And I said in the last video how he gave me that gift and basically saying the same thing, but saying it's a 10 for me for you to listen to your body and to communicate that to me. And this time he was saying it in a little bit different way, but he said, just like if I was trying to walk on a sprained ankle, because his ankles can get sprained pretty easily. So he said, if you saw me continually trying to walk on a sprained ankle, it would stress you out, right? And I said, yeah, right. So he's helping me and those parts gain some kind of empathy and understanding that he genuinely feels better when he knows that I'm listening to my body and I don't push myself beyond, and re-injure myself and then have to be bedridden or need even more help, right? So in the big picture, it's actually really, really kind to not push me on my boundaries and ask for help. So part of the help is being in a healthy, safe relationship with a person where I can speak for my parts and he can speak for his parts, and there's no shaming, and there's just healthy communication and love for each other, right? So that's been really healthy. Obviously, if I was not in a healthy relationship, those parts would continue to protect me in that way. And that's why there are no bad parts. They are very benevolent. They just needed to be updated. Hey, the person in front of you is okay with you asking for help, right? And also because I rarely do, because they don't want me to. So as I've observed myself, and this is not meant to be prescriptive for you, I encourage you to really observe yourself. You don't need to have all the answers. So much comes in just awareness, just after the fact, going, oh, that's interesting. I noticed this. And there's no judgment whatsoever. As you begin to see it, you don't have to be it, right? You begin to observe the parts as they take over. And again, without judgment, it's just, oh, I see that I had a really fearful part that came in and blocked me from listening to my body. That's so interesting. Can I get curious about why, about what happened, about what it's protecting, what it's afraid would happen if it let me listen to my body in that moment? And you'll begin seeing patterns, right? And your patterns may be different than mine. But some of the common patterns that I've seen, or parts that block the way, one is a big one. I have this beautiful people-pleasing part named Cassandra, and there's really a whole team around her. She has all these, like, I call them minions, but she just has been such a dominant part of my system. And her thing is, if I don't please the person in front of me, I will die or they will die, because my first husband died by suicide. So she has been just so entrenched, so convinced, I must please the person in front of me at all costs. So part of that is not saying no, not asking for help, right? Woo! When we ask for help, though, the balloons rise up. It's a gift. Um, so so that's been really entrenched. So that's kind of on autopilot, right? Don't ask for help. Don't say no. Don't displease the person in front of me. So those are going to clash, right? So my body is saying, you absolutely can't do this. You need to ask for help. Or it's saying no. I'm having an aversion response. Someone asked me to do something and I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. My people-pleasing team will override it and say yes, even though my whole body is saying no, because there's a whole threat of death. And so working with that people-pleasing team, and it's been a very extensive journey, but very well worth it. And it really is daily. It's checking in with them and saying, how are you doing today? Noticing when they get activated and they override, without judgment, giving appreciation. I see that you felt like you had to say yes, even though the body said no. Tell me about it. Tell me what's up. Doing some updating. It really is like this ongoing relationship between this team of parts that have led my life and kept me safe my whole life, and my adult self that can be curious and compassionate and clear and confident, and there's a constant interaction relationship like a parent and child. So that's a big one, really big one. And so the second group of parts or pattern that I've seen is really actually quite related, because the biggest reason why I will override my body compass is because my parts perceive that I'm going to upset a person in front of me. Um, Often when I'm by myself, I will not override my body compass at this point. I will do whatever I need to do to support myself. But if there are people around me that my parts perceive I'm going to be a burden, they're going to be put out in some way, um, that's just death. And so it really does. There are parts who are like, let's just hide away and be a recluse and not be around anybody, and that'll be easier. But of course, I need relationship, and my husband is a very safe relationship. So there's a lot of updating. But so what I was going to say is there's this people pleasing, huge cluster of parts, and underneath that, really supporting them, I've found, is my huge army of inner critics. The inner critics are like the next line of defense. Okay, so what happens is my body says, no, I can't do this. But my people-pleasing parts detect you're going to upset the person in front of you. So they advocate really hard to override that body that's saying no and say yes. Now, if I I'm at the point now where I do listen to my body and I do say no to the person in front of me, then the inner critics come in and they just bash me. They just hound me. How dare you? How could you do that? You're upsetting this person. You're selfish. You're awful, right? Or you're a burden. There's all these different refrains that they have. So I have a bunch of inner critics, and they have kind of different jobs. So one, it would be kind of like a guilt tripper. You selfish thing. Why did you do that? Kind of perfectionist parts. Oh my gosh, you're going to look so terrible to these people. There's per performing kind of conformist parts that keep, well, there's a part, her name is Edna. She has this huge rule book, right? She keeps track of all the shoulds, all the have tos, all the cultural expectations, whether that's in the wide culture or this kind of specific culture or with this person. You shouldn't have done that. You should do this, right? It's full of shoulds and have tos. So that one will come in. And if those don't get me to then kind of take back my no, then the kingpin of critics, what Jay Early calls the destroyer, will come in. It's what Dick Schwartz calls a murderous part. It's a type of suicidal part that will come in and say, you filthy, mine says, you pathetic, weak, selfish being, you deserve to die, right? So, I mean, this is huge amounts of inner punishment and torment that happens on the inside if I listen to my body and displease a person in front of me, right? So that the people pleasers are the first line of defense. If that does not work, then these huge inner critics come in. And I've spoken for all these parts to my husband. I explained to him, it really isn't about you. It's not that you're doing anything. It's that these parts are so entrenched with the idea that it's dangerous. Um, and it's interesting. These parts don't distinguish between my loved ones. It's just anybody. It's it's death to displease anybody. They've just become very generalized, or some of them. Now, I've done I've had a lot of interaction, a lot of befriending with these parts. A bunch of different inner critics, my destroyer part, and I see their good intention. And so, and unless they're really, really blended with me, I can usually get a little bit of space and say, hey, I see you. Wow, you're really, really activated. You're really upset. You are so afraid, right? It's kind of like what you would do with a child. You reflect back what you're seeing. You are so anxious. Oh my goodness, you are suffering, right? So I'm being observing, reflecting back with compassion. And I see that you're afraid, and I see that you're doing this for a reason. Can I help you? Right? There are times when they're so big that it's very, very hard for me to have that space and have that self energy. Um, and my husband will notice, and he'll say something like, "This isn't you. This isn't you. Who am I talking to? Where are you?" Things like that. But let's see. So yeah, so the three biggest blockers that I put were, and they're all connected for me. There's the people-pleasing team, the inner critic team, and then a subcategory of that, which is kind of this social consciousness of this kind of autopilot of you have to listen to the external authorities, you've got to follow the social norms and rules. It's safer that way, right? And so it can be very rigid, and these parts really like to have a set uh, uh, a set of rules to follow, right? So say with the carnivore diet, right? Okay, we can eat this many calories, we can eat this, count these macros, do this and this, and then I feel safe because I know what to do, and then I do that. So there's not a lot of flexibility to listen to my body in the moment because I'm on this autopilot again that feels safe to many of my parts, but it just doesn't have leeway to, well, today I'm ill, or today I might need extra carbohydrates for this reason, or extra water, or what extra salt or something, right? um so it doesn't, those parts don't allow me to be fluid. Now, there can be other parts for you too that block you from listening to your body. Like maybe you have a taskmaster part, or a part that tells you that if you aren't working and going and accomplishing things, then you don't have worth, right? If you have a part like that, I've heard, Glennon and Amanda, and We Can Do Hard Things, talk a lot about a part like that that came from this history of when their dad would come home, if they weren't busy doing a chore, hadn't accomplished a lot, they would get berated and yelled at, and you lazy, terrible thing, or whatever. I don't know exactly what he said, but so these parts come by it honestly. They so desperately want to avoid being harassed, right? And they're stuck back in that time, when their dad was doing that, and they become on autopilot to protect them, to help them. Perhaps you have a part like that, right? To help you have worth and avoid punishment. And so they have really, really good intention. But hopefully, if you're in a safe space with in safe relationship, you're with someone who will not do that to you. And so you can update them, appreciate their good intention, update them. They may need you to also go back to those times to reparent them, to bring them out of that time. The whole IFS process is beautiful for doing that. Okay, so ultimately, the ways to kind of help that I found, first just observing the patterns and the types of parts. You begin to listen to your body, and then you watch parts override it. That's okay. And you get curious about them, right? So you begin to know the parts intimately. You begin to just observe them from afar, reflect back to them, inquire about their history, connect with them regularly, especially when they get activated. Oh, I see you. I see you're upset. I see you don't want to listen to the body. I see you stopped me there. Tell me why. Get really curious. And you can go back and reparent, witness them, reparent them, unburden them, or what they protect, right? It might be a protector that you're dealing with. And then um, yeah, meet with them regularly, greet them when they arise. Like I said, I see you. Observe them without judgment, with curiosity. Aha, that's so interesting that you're here now. I know you're here for a reason. Um, And it's also been helpful to me to note progress, okay? Because you might be hearing me say this and you're thinking, Christine, you've been doing this, IFS for a long time. You have, you teach it. How can you still struggle with people-pleasing parts overriding, or inner critics bashing you, that kind of thing? Um, and I have parts that maybe I'm projecting my parts onto you right now. I have critics that say that. What's wrong with you? You've done all this, inner exploration and connection, and this can still happen. So it can help me to go back and look at the progress that I have made and kind of where I was and where I am now. So kind of like I was saying before, something I noticed is that recently I had a bit of a shame spiral where some big inner critics came out. And I realized, okay, I've gotten to the point where I'm so in touch with my body compass, like I said, that I absolutely know when it's saying no, when there's an aversion response, when there's an attraction response, when there's pain, when there's symptoms. Uh, I can listen to it. I know what my body's telling me. That's huge. There was a time in my life when I had no clue what I wanted, what I didn't want. My parts were just completely in control. My body was numbed out. I could not listen to it. So that's a huge, huge step of progress. I can hear my body's signals. Um, and I've also come to the point where I can listen to them and say no when my body says no. That's huge. Before it was like, absolutely not, right? Those people pleasers were there. So, and even I can say no and the inner critics won't rise up too big if I say no. What's difficult still for me is if I say no to a person once and they persist, they insist, they give me heck about it. It's so hard for my system now still to say no twice or three times, right? My people pleasers come in and cave, right? Okay, okay, right? And so it's this terrible pattern because if someone doesn't accept the no and then I say yes, they learn that, oh, I just need to pressure her. I just need to manipulate her or I just need to make her feel uncomfortable enough and then she'll say yes. Um, and so I've been just getting really curious and talking with those parts about, like I said, my husband won't do that. He's very, very honoring, unless it's inadvertent, right? But he's very honoring of my limits and my boundaries and my no and my needs. And me, like he said, he wants me to listen to my body. So he really will respect that. And so there is a bit of um, taking a look at the types of people who will not accept my no the first time and evaluating, um, can I be in relationship with them at least right now, right? Maybe as I continue to work with the parts, they'll become so resilient that they'll say, no, no, no. And inner critics are fine and it's all good. But what I found is that the self-led choice is not about where I should be if I was healed and whole. It's and completely well, it's about where I am right now. So the self-led decision would be, I can't regularly interact with this person because, and it's not even necessarily their fault. It's nothing wrong with them asking twice necessarily, but my system can't handle it. So it's my boundary is always about me and about caring for me. It's not about punishing the other person or anything like that. So I can care for myself and say, you just again observe it and say, okay, I'm gonna maybe create a little bit of distance or boundary with this particular person that tends to keep pressing when I say no. And if it's a person who's interacted with me for a long time and they are very used to me, my people-pleasing parts leading, I get that they would be very perplexed. What? Christine said no to me? How dare she? Because they're just not used to it. So as we begin to heal these parts, a lot of times our relationships do change because the people we were in relationship before were the ones who benefited from us not having boundaries or not having self-worth or meeting our own needs. So as that changes, some of those relationships may change. And that person may be able to adapt and continue having relationships. So you might give them that chance. But as you see a pattern that they're not, distance, it may be the very self-led decision to make. All right. Oh, and it was so wonderful. Last thing I'll say, I was meeting with these parts and that were having trouble saying no again and again. And they were saying, I just don't get it. I don't, and these are my parts, it's not myself, but my parts are very black and white, right? They're very either or. So my parts were saying, I don't get it. How do I balance value for myself and value for other? Because they see it like I either have to choose myself or I have to choose other, right? I have to value myself and totally devalue them, or I have to totally value them and totally devalue myself. And they were really struggling with this balance. And so they kind of put, and I said, okay, let's put the question out into the universe. How do we balance this? And it was the next morning that Haley McGee, who's an account that I really love on Instagram, she wrote a whole book called, I think it's called Stop People Pleasing or How to Stop People Pleasing. Her whole account is about people pleasing, and my people pleasing parts absolutely love it. So I constantly sharing her content. And she did a whole post specifically about how do you balance self-value and healthy boundaries with other people, you know? And it was, you can maybe go back and look for it, but it was so refreshing to my system. Just things like understanding that in general, you know, a relationship is not always 50-50. Sometimes one person needs more and other times another person needs more. But in the big picture, it really does need to be a balanced, reciprocal give and take in order to have a healthy relationship. So it's not necessarily tit for tat, but there does need to be a give and take between each person. It can't be, I'm always giving and you're always taking. That's not going to be a healthy relationship. Or what was another thing that she said? Let me see if I can remember. I think it was to listen to other people's opinions, but to ultimately always check it with your own value and your own needs. That is the bottom line of making decisions is what does my inner family say? Because ultimately I am responsible for me. I am not responsible for other people. And so I can take in, you know, other people's wisdom, their opinions, I can weigh it, but ultimately it has to be a decision that's made in agreement with my inner system. And that may be in alignment with someone else and may be totally opposite of someone else, but I don't have the same life as them and I need to primarily care for myself. So it's not that I don't consider them, they're just not my authority, right? I'm my own inner authority. There were several others in the post that were really great too, but I just thought it was really serendipitous that my system kind of put that question out there. And of course myself knows those things and really resonates with them and can detect, oh yes, yes, absolutely. It's a both and I am my own primary caregiver. You probably know that I'm always saying that. A lot of the things that I say over and over, it's because I and my parts need to hear them over and over. Okay, so that was a bit of another ramble for you. I hope you found it valuable, and I really hope that you can get curious about your parts. You cannot get it wrong. You always make sense. As you get curious in your own system, you'll see that you make sense. That everything that your system does or doesn't do is for a reason. And if you can get curious about it, it'll tell you. Those parts will tell you their history, and you can begin to help them, whether that's going back and helping them or updating them or just being in loving relationship with them. Or maybe they're telling you, there's something in your life now that's not safe, right? And you can make small gradual changes because there may be other parts that want that thing. And so you can have a lot of inner part meetings and, there's no pressure to change anything until your system is on board with it. Just listen to them. All right. So we start our multi-day journey to Ecuador tomorrow. And next time I come to you, I will likely be in Ecuador. So I'll see you then. If you have any questions or any comments, please leave them in the comments below.